Newspapers very occupied with the Labour leader Ed Miliband yesterday and his speech from the conference. Let's go to Brighton, where it all was yesterday, and say good morning to Ed Miliband. I think you're over the front pages, all the front pages this morning. And before we get into detail, could I just ask you, how do you do that? How do you do that standing there for an hour business without a note, and yet you're so forensic about what you're saying and one thing leads to another? That's some skill.
Well, I try to have a conversation with people, Eamon, because what I've learnt over the years is that reading out a speech can be quite boring for people, and it's much better to do it as a conversation. I've got some stuff written down in advance, obviously, but then I just try and sort of make it up a little bit on the spot if there's other things I want to say, and you know, that's what I tried to do. But yeah. I could easily ask you how you do your job as well. So
autocue plays a big part in what I do, which was why that was a bit of professional admiration towards you there, the way you carried that out. But from admiration, I'll then bring you to some of the headlines, some of the less complimentary ones today. The Times, blackout threat over Miliband's fuel pledge. They're saying, the Daily Mail, they're particularly angst-ridden today. Back to the bad old days, fixing energy prices, grabbing land from property firms, boosting minimum wage. Red Ed revives 70s socialism, and Miliband turns up the heat on energy firms. Now, let's begin with the energy firms. And they're all going to get their bosses. They're in for a bit of a shock today. We get bills through the post. They're getting a letter from you through the post today. We can always, we have to pay our bills. They can always throw your letter, of course, in the bin. Do you think they're going to take much notice of what you have to say?
I think they will. Look, let me just say on this question of investment and the energy firms, I think we've got a market that isn't working. I think your viewers know that they're being overcharged by a market that isn't effective. Somebody's got to stand up and press the reset button on this market. That's why we've proposed a price freeze until the beginning of 2017, and why we've said after that we'll make sure we get new reforms in place so you can have a regulator that can act on behalf of the consumer and get the certainty, the long-term certainty that companies need to invest. I'm saying to them today, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Yeah. Let's hope they do that.
Yeah, I mean, you come to this with a fair amount of experience, because, correct me if I'm wrong, you used to be Energy Secretary, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So you've sat down with these boys, you've talked to them before, and I'm sure you've had conversations edging on this sort of thing before, and they will have said to you, I'm sure, in no uncertain terms, all well and good, Energy Secretary, but we'll do our job, don't you mess with the market. They'll not take this well, will they?
They won't, Eamon, but I think what Britain needs is a Prime Minister, a leader who's going to stand up to some of these powerful forces like the energy companies and call time when they're abusing their privileges. Because I'm in favour of competition, I'm in favour of markets, but they've got to be effective markets and it's got to be effective competition. And that's not what we see at the moment. And I just make this point to you, and it's something I did say to the energy companies when I was Energy Secretary. Unless you have public consent, unless you have public acceptability for the way they behave, you're never going to get the investment in, because you're never going to have the support you need going forward. So, you know, effective markets rely on consumers who believe they're getting a fair deal, as well as the right structures of competition, and that's what we're going to make sure happens.
Okay, and if this takes off and you get elected and this all happens, where do you stop? Because are the energy company profits any more ridiculous than supermarket profits, than petrol company profits? Will they all get a letter in the post as well?
I think energy is particular and a kind of outstanding issue, really, because it's not a properly effective functioning market. After all, these were nationalised industries, or a nationalised industry, 20 years or so back. That's what's changed. They were privatised, not particularly effectively. The market doesn't function effectively. We've known that for years, after all, and we've talked about it really ad nauseum for years and years and years. It's time someone acted. So I think this is a particular case, Eamon, but more generally, I want competition that works, markets that work in the public interest. that's part of my approach. That's part of how I approach these things.
I suppose I'm saying, I mean, I know you say that's a particular case, but why, they will say, why pick on us? Why not pick on payday lenders? Why not pick on real companies? And as I say, supermarkets, because I know you're talking about, and you're very aware of the pressure that families are facing, that wages are falling and prices are rising and that sort of thing. Why don't you go for them all? In for a penny, in for a pound.
Well, let me take the particular cases you talk about. In supermarkets, look, I think it's a much more competitive market than energy. In relation to payday lenders, we are concerned about the way payday lenders operate, and we've had a number of proposals to deal with that. So yes, when markets fail, when competition fails, I do think government has a responsibility to uphold the public interest. And it's all part, Eamon, of tackling the biggest issue that I think Britain faces, which is the cost of living crisis facing so many families in this country. I think that what Britain needs is a government that will stand up and do that, and we will.
Well, it's certainly different, but also, I mean, I'm just looking at your letter today, and you say to these bosses, our intention is now to reset the market, a market that has consistently failed to secure the confidence of the public. Do you know what? You could change the words in there and apply that to your own party. You could say, you know, that this could be a letter to yourself, and this is why people may be a bit cynical at this, and they may be saying, yeah, that's all well and good, but they may feel as if you're offering people 120 quid for their vote.
Not at all. What I'm offering people is a real alternative, is a party and a government that has learned lessons. I've been talking about immigration this week, big and controversial issue. We've learned lessons about how we need to respond to that issue, make sure that immigration works for people across the country, not just a few, that we have an economy that can still work for working people. So we've learnt lessons, we've listened to people about their biggest issues, like the cost of living crisis, the central issue they face, and we're saying we're ready to lead, we're ready to change things. And you know, I think people voted for change in 2010 and they didn't get the change they were voting for. They've got a government standing up for just a few people at the top. We're determined to stand up for ordinary families in this country, however powerful the forces are that we have to confront in that process.
Well,
now, I want successful big companies in this country. I really want successful big companies, but I want markets that work as part of that. And that's, I think, actually going to benefit business.
Yes, but is it practical? I mean, it's fine. I mean, you know, people will say to you, look, that's fine. You can say anything you want. You're in opposition. You don't have to run the company. The country, I meant to say, sorry. The practicalities of all of this is, if you are an energy company, for instance, and you know this is coming along, the fear is they'll just hike up their prices by some amount, £120 per household or whatever, to compensate for this. Can you? Is it practicable? Is this policy possible? How could you prevent them doing that? You can't really, can you?
Well, let me say a couple of things on that. First of all, if they collude together to raise their prices, then that's illegal, and even this regulator would act on that. But let me be clear, we will make sure this price is effective. There won't be any getting around this freeze. And look, if they suddenly start price gouging, just shooting up prices with no justification, then we'll obviously have to take account of that. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Personally, I think the companies will take a long, hard look at this and think, actually, what Labour is offering is a temporary price freeze to reset the market, and then a proper investment climate for the future. I hope they take up my offer of actually being part of the solution, not part of the problem.
A couple of quick questions, though, on it, which puzzled me. Why is it a freeze for 20 months? Why not a whole 2 years? A bit of OCD in me. I sort of think, you know, why not a full 2 years? Why is it 20 months?
Well, because the really important thing is there's a two-part process here. It's having the freeze until we can get in place the new regulator and the new system. And we believe we can do that in 20 months by the beginning of January 2017. So that's the reason for that. It's a two-part approach consistent with tackling the cost of living crisis.
OK, and here's the other question. Why don't you just go the whole hog? Why don't you just nationalise it, renationalise the power companies, or one of them?
Because I don't think that will work. And what I want is something that's practical and effective. I think competition can bring benefits for consumers. I think it can be made to work for the consumer, but we've got to reform the market. This is not about going backwards, this is about going forwards, and it is about a one-nation approach, Eamon, which is about responsibility from all in our society, including those at the top.
Now, I'm quoting this Daily Mail headline again today. They are criticising you for fixing energy prices. They're criticising you for talking about the property firms holding on to land, and you said use it or lose it, I think you said yesterday. They're criticising you for wanting to boost the minimum wage, and they're saying, Red Ed, that's you, revive 70s socialism. A lot of people welcome that, a lot of people will fear that. What have they got to fear on that front from Ed Miliband? How red, just give me, in degrees of red, how red are you? Are you sort of like Manchester United red, or are you more pink?
You're so tempting, Eamon. Look, I'm one nation, Ed. That's what I'm about. I'm about responsibility all the way up our society. And look, people come up with these scare stories. The energy companies will be coming up with their scare stories. The Tories will be coming up with their scare stories. Where I'm focused is on the cost of living crisis facing families and how we sort it out, how we have companies that can work effectively in a proper market, and how we can have a country that works for working people again. And that's absolutely where my focus is.
Right. Do you accept that, this is the morning after the night before, you did so well yesterday. I mean, even your enemies would say, bloomin' good speech, he did it, he carried it off very well. Do you accept the problem for you is now, not conferences, which you seem to do very well, it's between conferences, and it's between, I think one of the papers said today, you've fired up the party faithful. Do you accept that conference to conference, the hard bit is the in-between?
Of course, look, the hard bit is every day working on behalf of the British people and also saying to them how we're going to change the country, and that's what we're determined to do. But let me be clear about this, Eamon. We're now going to take this message in the next 20 months about how we tackle the cost of living crisis, how we have a government that stands up for ordinary families, not the privileged few, how we change our economy so it works for working people, and how Labour has changed. We're going to take that message out to the country, because in the end it's the country that's the boss. They get to decide. I think what we've done...
Sorry for interrupting you. And just a final point, because I know you've got to go. And you're saying you're standing up for ordinary families and whatever. Where do you stand on the firefighters' strike? Because they're saying they're being asked to do their job up until 60 years of age, and they say this is a physical thing, they just can't do it. Would you back them? What do you think about them going out on strike?
What I say about any industrial dispute, Eamon, is it's a sign of failure. Look, both sides should be getting round the table, because we need an effective fire service that is actually going to serve people, and what the government should be doing is not ramping up the rhetoric, but getting round the table with the firefighters to try and prevent this happening and sort it out.